and it is 10 o'clock. Is there anyone else that we know is attending that we do not see yet?
No.
Okay. Because we have a quorum and it is 10 o'clock, I will call to order the October 21st Peninsula Regional Planning Organization's meeting. And as I do, I welcome everyone, and I welcome everyone that may be in our audience. This is the first meeting that our group has met via Zoom webinar. As I normally do, I will introduce the panelists as I see them on my screen. We all know each other, but I introduce them so that the viewing public knows who we all are. And I just go across my screen for this. On my screen, the first person I see is Sarah Black, who is the Peninsula RTPO's coordinator. I see myself, I'm Beck Ashby, I'm the chair of the RPTO, and I represent the city of Port Orchard. Next is Ed Coviello, who is also an RTPO coordinator, and he is employed by Kitsap Transit. Nicole Gauthier is the executive director of Jefferson Transit. Amy Asher, and if you want to wave, Amy, so everybody sees you, is executive director of Mason Transit. And I may get your titles incorrect, and I do apologize for that. Next, we have Marty Allen, our favorite representative from the Skokomish tribe. And we have Michael Bateman representing today the city of Paulsbo, and he is in their transportation department. Steve Gray is representing the Clallam County, and he too is in their public works department. George Mazier is with Olympic Region Department of Transportation. Tracy Parker is with the Squaxin tribe. David Fort is representing Kitsap County, and he is also in their transportation office. Susan Matthews is with one of the tribes, Lower Elwha, I believe. Thank you, Susan. Wendy Clark Getson is with the Jamestown Sklallam tribe. Lindsay Warren Schwarm looks like he may be ill. He represents the city of Port Angeles. And Chris Hartman, excuse me, is with the Port of Port Angeles. Ted Jackson represents the Port of Allen. Stephanie Lilly is with Kitsap Transit. Deidre Peterson, there she is. Deidre Peterson is with the city of Shelton. Leslie Schneider is with the city of Bainbridge Island, and Deidre and Leslie are both elected officials. Tracy and Ben Thomas is with the city of Port Townsend, and Rachel Anderson is with the city of Sequim. Did I miss anyone? As people turned off their video, they moved around on my screen. So I'm hoping that I was able to introduce everyone. If I wasn't, show your face and we'll introduce you, but I think I managed to get everyone. Okay, thank you. With that, we will move down to the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'd like to move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, so you're going to approve the consent agenda. I was looking for approval of the agenda in total.
Oh, great. I'll back that out then and just approve the agenda in total as printed.
Thank you. Ed, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Sarah, can we send John a link to the meeting, John Clausen? He's having troubles getting in.
Yes, and I also that was also a call from Monty. So pardon, Ed, can you keep track of some notes there? And I'm going to.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's perfect. We want to get those folks in as part of the meeting. Is there a second to the motion to approve the agenda?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Michael. There is a motion to approve that has been seconded to approve our agenda. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Hearing none, the agenda is approved with unanimous consent. Now, Wendy, would you like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, I would like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from August 19th, the invoicing of the first quarter fiscal year 23, as well as this really wonderful UPWP annual report that Sarah and Ed prepared.
Thank you. Is there a second to approve the consent agenda?
I'll second.
Thank you, Amy. Is there anyone who would be voting against the consent agenda? Okay, the consent agenda has been moved and seconded, and I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the consent agenda? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved with unanimous consent. So now we will move down to our first agenda item, which is approval of our regional tip for the year. And I believe, Mr. Covello, you would be leading that discussion.
Yes, yes.
Thank
Let
you.
me share screen here.
Oh, just a second. Before you do, Monty, do you want to show your face? You're in our meeting now. Okay, there's Monty. I would like to introduce Monty. He is with Jefferson County. I just want to make sure our public knows who everyone is. Thank you, Monty.
And you got John on now too.
Oh, okay, John. Oh, and there's John Clausen, Executive Director at Kitsap Transit. Okay, so now I think that everyone that is in our meeting has been introduced to the public. I apologize for interrupting, Ed.
Oh, that's okay. So it's another year already, and we have another RTIP before you. This year's RTIP has 163 projects, both planned and secured, and projects with secured funding. What's a little bit different about this year's RTIP is we've gone ahead and created a web map application. So I just want to share that with you. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, everyone see my screen?
I see
You
your
see a
dog.
nice, yeah, you see a very important dog who pretty much owns me right now. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so if you go to our front page, PRTPO.org, you can go ahead and see the what is the draft RTIP, but below that there's a draft 23 to 28 RTIP map. When you open that link, it takes you to a GIS map that we've created in conjunction with WashDOT in George's office. I think you might remember from our last meeting, Olympic Region presented their projects. And here's an example, and these gray ones here are the Olympic Region projects. I've added projects from our RTIP that have secure funding. I've added that as orange, and we actually have a legend here. So I titled it Local Projects. So we can go ahead and pick on this one up here. And then this is a roadway project down by the Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge. I believe Clallam County is the sponsoring agency. And it gives all sorts of information about the project, the year that it's going to be going into construction, 2023, and the total estimated amount. It has the funding status of secured in there. So that's one example. Another one, we can go down to beautiful Mason County and click on the Tunerville Bridge Replacement Project. And this is by Mason County Public Works. And you'll see that there's 4 tabs here. One is for the initial right-of-way phase. The second one is for construction. Let's see what the third is. Third is saying county boundaries. And number 4 was for the PE. I'm probably going to get those in order. So this is on our website, so that way the public can come and look at and see some of the work that's occurring in our region. One of the things I'd like to improve upon is, if you notice here, that sort of the order of the titles, I think I need to probably take the phase and actually spell out planning, so that way the public can see that, or for construction, instead of CN, I should type in construction and then move it up towards the top here. If I look at WashDOTs, it's a lot more logical in how they set it up. So that's some work I need to do over the next few months to get this ready for the next RTIP.
A good idea, Ed, but I'd say what you've got right now is pretty darn good.
It's a good start, yeah. And I think we can go ahead and just keep on improving this and making a better product year over year. It's really simple work. One of the challenges I have is I would like to get the plan projects in there. However, I simply don't have time to find out where all the planned projects are. I had to go and kind of do my best guess using Google coordinates. So maybe at a future meeting we can discuss about if folks submitting their projects into the RTIP can submit their Google coordinates with that project. That way I can get all the planned ones in there. So I could have 3. I could have the WashDOT category. I could have secured local and then planned local. That's just an idea. Or I can just find the time, and I hope I get the locations right. And so if you see any locations that are way off, please let me know. I'll go through and make the edit and repost. So if you decide to approve the RTIP today, what I'll do is I'll take all the projects with secured funding, and next week I'll forward it to WashDOT's local program office. And that way it gets included in the statewide transportation improvement program for next year, and money can keep flowing. And everyone was great this year. Thank you, Amy, for your patience. I kind of dropped the ball on one of the projects, but we're good. Everything's good. So I really enjoy this process.
Thank you. I also want to welcome Gary Anderson from the Port of Bremerton to our meeting this morning.
Thank you. Sorry
Thanks.
for being late.
Yeah, that's okay. We're just trying to make sure we get everyone introduced. Ed, is there any way on the mapping to indicate that Kitsap's projects are not included because they're included in the PSRC work? Someone may not be that familiar, and why aren't there any local projects in Kitsap? If we could put a notation there somehow.
Yeah, let me see if I can find a way to do that and get that on there. That's a good point. We don't want people going in there and thinking that nothing's going on in Kitsap, because there's a whole lot going on.
Exactly.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Clausen.
Yeah, I have a question. Since you brought up the Kitsap projects, and Ed, we have some of DOT's projects listed, but the big Gorst fix is not listed anywhere in there.
Mhm.
Reason for that, or
Yeah, that funding hasn't been obligated, and George can probably answer that, but it hasn't come through us at the RTPO.
Okay.
So it hasn't been obligated at the RTPO.
Yeah, and I'll just add what you said, that if you get to the point of adding planned projects, that would be one that would show up at that point. It's still kind of in the plan phase.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the RTIP? If there is no further discussion, we would entertain a motion to approve the RTIP.
Madam Chair, I would so move. We move the RTIP.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Who was that? Did I?
Ted Jackson, sorry.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve the 23 through 28 Regional Transportation Improvement Program. It has been moved and seconded. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion to approve the RTIP? Hearing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. And thank you, everyone. And thank you for the good work, Ed. And I personally really appreciated the map. I thought that was a enhancement that will be beneficial to many people.
More work to come on that. Just want to get it better and better.
Thank you. Thank you. And now our next item of business is the Human Services Transportation Plan update. And I'm going to deviate a little bit with your approval from our normal process here, because this is the first time we've done a webinar format. So what I would like to do under this approval section is to have our normal introduction of the agenda item, and Thera would be doing that. And then I would like to open the conversation up for public comment. I do not know if we have anyone in our audience, but normally, or in the past, we would have allowed them to comment. And so I would open it up for their public comment. Many people have worked very hard on this document and they may wish to give input. And then we would move to our normal discussion. Ed, are you going to tell me there's no one in the audience?
Correct. Right now, we have nobody both on the webinar or in person at Kitsap Transit at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I can still open up that public comment section and then close it if there is no one. Without objection, is that acceptable to the group? Okay, we'll move forward then. And Sarah, do you want to give an introduction on the Human Services Transportation Plan?
Yes, thank you. And thank you to so many of the people on this webinar, because a lot of you participated in the development of this. So just by way of very quick background, about a year ago, PRTPO began to embark on an update. Had received notice of funding, and we'll talk about that in a second, to update the plan. Thank you to Kitsap Transit for accepting and administering the federal grant that enabled that to happen. And so what we've done since basically January is we have updated the 2019 Human Services Transportation Plan to bring it current to 2022. The Human Services Transportation Plan is focused on the mobility needs of the most vulnerable people in the community who are unable to drive. And that might be because of age, it might be because of disability or income, being sort of the key reasons or the key vulnerable populations that this plan is focused on. And it's focused, the service providers that it's focused on are our public transit agencies, our tribal transit partners, our nonprofit service providers, like OliCap or Coastal Cap or ECHO, as well as our for-profit or non-emergency medical transport groups like Rocket Transportation or the Paddy Wagon. So there's a really a wide array of transportation service providers who this plan affects. What we've done over the last 10 months is we have, with basically bringing you along at every step of the way, we have updated our understanding of baseline conditions in the region, the demographics. You saw last month overview of our online story map where you could go in and kind of look at the data characteristics of the region. We have updated our baseline, or understanding of the baseline mobility needs for the region. Working with the partners, we were able to go back and review and validate and update the sort of the barriers or gaps in service that people with special mobility needs face, especially in a highly rural region, as well as the strategies that are necessary. If all of these strategies could be funded, we would not have any mobility gaps for our special needs populations. Working with our service providers, we were able to update, come up with some draft understandings and strategies. We received input from the public throughout. So starting back in the springtime, working through our service providers to the constituents that they serve, the clients that they serve, we conducted some polls and surveys to understand their characteristics, their needs, make sure we weren't missing anything in our assessments. Had we overlooked something that's important? And then after we had the draft plan together, what you saw in August was the draft plan, and you approved it for public review. We took the whole package out for public review. And when we, as PRTPO, when we talk about the public review, that included the general public, but it also included the providers themselves, because that is, they help develop the plan, but they're also part of our public as well, and the folks who would be responsible for implementing it. We, it was all conducted virtually. We discussed that with the board back in February. We realized that virtual, while there are some barriers or some challenges associated with virtual participation, it also opens up a lot of opportunities that don't exist otherwise, as well as uncertain health issues and just practicalities in a 4-county region of this size. Public meetings, especially for this target audience, are problematic. So we did a virtual online process. We had an array of materials. I hope that some of you all were able to go out and take a look. We've left that web page up. We're reformatting it pending your approval today, assuming you approve this. That will become a permanent home for the Human Services Transportation Plan, and we will be able to add and augment, add to that and augment the information that's there on an ongoing basis from here on, and hopefully make future updates more efficient. We received not a lot of comments, but we weren't really expecting a lot of comments, but we did get a few suggestions, things that would help us improve the plan. We made a few tweaks to it, clarified some language that wasn't clear, and what you have in your packet, hopefully nobody just hit print, but what you have in your packet is the plan as it exists today. The importance of this plan, besides just providing a picture and understanding some important strategies to go forward for meeting these mobility needs, a really important function of it is in the evaluation of projects to receive consolidated grants. We're going to talk about that later, but that is a statewide funding process that WSDOT administers. And the Human Services Transportation Plan is a factor in that process and influences the award of points to projects. So, and like I said, we'll talk about that the next agenda item, but it does underscore the importance of the Human Services Transportation Plan and a little bit of the timing of why things have been a little bit compressed right now. So, so that's sort of a wrap up here. What will come next for us, assuming the board approves the plan today, is that we will reach out. We have well, first I'll just say I'm going to put together sort of a WSDOT works with a checklist when they review things for compliance. And so given that we have a story map format and a hard document format, I'm just going to pull all the materials together for them and make it very easy for them to go down their checklist, because our plan's not written in the same order as their checklist. And so we'll pull that together and get that off and submit the plan, the final plan to them. And then we'll also use that. I will immediately turn around and notify all of the potential grant applicants for consolidated grants that this is available and to reference that. And you will be asked to amend this plan in December. I know I'm asking you to approve it today. I will be coming back to you in December with an amendment to it. You will periodically, and until it is updated again, whenever there is a new consolidated grants call for projects, once you complete that evaluation, again, we're going to talk about that in the next agenda item, but once you complete that evaluation and come up with your project rankings, we will amend those projects and their rankings into the Human Services Transportation Plan so that it just helps cross the T's and dot the I's and check the boxes for WSDOT. So you're going to adopt it today, hopefully, and you're going to hopefully amend it in 2 more months, but that's just the way that process worked timing-wise. So that's, Beck, I don't know if you want to talk about the resolution. That's sort of the background on the plan. I was thinking maybe answer any questions and then talk about the resolution.
Right, I will. But first I want to open it up to any public that wants to have any sort of testimony on the plan. I don't know, we didn't a couple minutes ago have anyone in the audience, either in person or not. I just wanted to make sure that those who are actively engaged in this and not members of our board had a chance for input.
We currently don't have anybody.
Okay, thank you, Ed. So I will close that opportunity for public comment. I didn't want them to have to wait till the end of our meeting. Moving forward, I will ask if there's any discussion on the plan itself, because I do want to talk about the resolution. But is there any comments or questions, concerns on the plan itself that we will be asked to approve? This would be the appropriate time to address any issues or make any comments you have. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to move on to the resolution. And do you want to bring up the resolution? I think you probably, Sarah, you probably have a red line version.
I do.
Okay.
Do you see my screen?
Yeah, somehow I see. There we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know why
Okay.
it rearranged, but yeah.
When I read the resolution, when we got down to the third whereas, it indicated that the RTPO had received a grant from DOT, and that that grant was administered by Kitsap Transit. And I personally preferred more detail in that the RTPO, in my mind, did not receive the grant. We were offered a federal grant, not a state grant. We were offered a federal grant from DOT to update this plan, which the RTPO then assigned to Kitsap Transit, our lead planning agency, to execute and administer for this purpose, for this update purpose. I just felt when we were originally offered this grant, it took us a while to realize it was a federal grant. And when we did realize it was a federal grant, we had to do quite a bit of activity to be able to use those monies. And Kitsap Transit stepped up. I think we all know that history. What had happened when we originally moved away from DOT as our lead planning agency, there was nothing in those records at that time to indicate that this grant that we have received before was federal dollars. And I just felt that it was important to capture that in our resolution. So I would open that up for discussion to see if that language change is appropriate. And just anyway, I open it up for your discussion. I'm not hearing anyone having opinion on it. John Clausen, do you want to say anything about it? Because it does involve your agency.
I see that it's perfectly appropriate, Beck. I don't see any problem with it at all. And it certainly does clarify the process that we've been using.
Yeah, that was my intent. My intent was for historic purposes. The next time we're offered money and we go back to this, we can see that right in the resolution. We would not have to go back through all of our minutes.
Beck, can I stop the screen share at this point?
Sure, please.
Stop that? Okay.
Beck, I think that that change is really good, as you said, for how we approach it next year. And I see no issue with continuing with Kitsap Transit as lead agency or the next lead agency to administer the Human Services Transportation Plan contract.
If there's no other discussion, we would entertain a motion to approve the resolution. And I believe the resolution approves the HSTP.
It does. Resolution 03-2022, adopting the 2022 Human Services Transportation Plan for the region.
Correct. Is there someone who would like to make that motion with the amendments to the resolution?
I move to approve resolution 02, I move to approve resolution 02, 2022 approving, oh, that's the RTIP, I'm so sorry. There we are. Resolution 03-2022 approving PRTPO's 2022 Human Services Transportation Plan as amended.
Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Deidre.
Second.
Thank you, Michael. It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 03-2022 as amended. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against approving resolution 0322 as amended? Hearing none, the motion approves with unanimous consent. And thank you, Sarah, for all of the work that has been done on this. We thank Kitsap Transit. We were very grateful for them for administering and executing this work program for us. And now for the real reason that we have this Human Services Transportation Plan, we will move down to our next agenda item, which is the consolidated grant application process. So Sarah, I will turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Beck. And so I'm coming to you today hot on the heels. Like I said, I think at the last meeting, as soon as you approved the HSTP, we were going to be moving right into consolidated grants. That process, this is a state funding, a statewide competitive funding process that WashDOT administers to support projects that include projects that support our Human Services Transportation Plan, but more than that. But the Human Services Transportation Plan is used to assign points to projects. So sort of in a nutshell, what happens is WashDOT has issues a call for projects. It's been out on the streets since the middle of July, I believe, and that process will close on October 27th. So what will happen is WashDOT will send us a list of all the projects that providers in the Peninsula region submitted, and PRTPO will be asked to evaluate those projects and make sure that they are consistent with the Human Services Transportation Plan, and to rank those projects and assign them letter grades, which I'll talk about in a second. And those letter grades then confer points to those projects in the statewide competitive process. The letter grades that and each RTPO is assigned a set amount of slots, ranking slots, based on the number of counties in the region, the population, various factors. I'm not really quite privy to how we ended up with what we have, but PRTPO has 7 ranking slots for A projects, 7 slots for B projects, and 7 slots for C projects. And PRTPO will be asked to take all the projects that WashDOT receives from this region and rank them, which ones are A projects, which are B, and which are C. What I'm here to talk with you about this morning is the process by which you will conduct that evaluation. Because of the deadlines that we have to operate under, WashDOT must have your final approved list, not the list that you're going to approve, but your final approved list by January. So that means we need you to take action on this in December, not February. So we have worked backwards schedule-wise to figure out how we could pull that off. And that's what I will be talking about with you. We are going to do a process similar as we did before. What this puts forward is a process similar to what we did before, where we will convene an independent advisory group to sort of be the workhorse on this, to roll up their sleeves and really do the detailed look at every single application, and then meet with each other and collaboratively evaluate them and then rank them, and then forward their ranking recommendation on to the board. Because of the scheduling, we are unable to include the TAC in this process. We talked about that last meeting with you all. It's just if we had to eliminate either the TAC or the advisory group to make this happen, it seemed most beneficial to keep this advisory group. The advisory group, what we envision is a 5-member advisory group. None of the advisory group members will have a project in the hopper. We cannot know just yet. You know, I intend to do a little bit of ground truthing here or sleuthing in the next week or so to see, but last time around, all 4 of our transit agencies had projects in the running. So we invited, requested Intercity Transit to be our transit representative from outside of the area, who's familiar with human services transportation projects and the nature of these kinds of projects, but did not have any projects in our process. We also intend to bring in somebody from the human services transportation community, again, somebody who doesn't have a project in the running. And again, we won't know just yet how that's going to play out, but we're starting to lay that groundwork now, as well as 3 other representatives from the board or membership from within the region who don't have projects in the hopper, but are familiar with this funding program, maybe have participated in the past, and can weigh in. And Beck, it looks like you an observation.
You didn't mention tribes. I would like to see a tribe member and
Yes.
2 board members instead of 3
A
board
tribe and 2 board. Okay. And so again, so what we'll do is we will look, if we have tribal members who don't have projects in, we will ask one of them to participate. If all of our tribal members have projects in the hopper, we have other tribes in the region who are not members, and we would ask them to participate. Our goal is to make sure that there's not any perceived conflict of interest with the review committee. And so the review committee will review each of the project applications. What we did last time, and this is the game plan this time around, is that the main application will be exactly what's given to WashDOT. We're not going to ask our partners to complete something separate. So it's got a lot of extraneous material that the advisory group doesn't really need to pay too much attention to because it's outside of their subject matter area. But it gives us a good enough understanding of what each application is. There'll be a summary page on top of it that links that project back to the Human Services Transportation Plan and just summarizes the key points. And then we're also asking each of our applicants, like we did before, to do a really short video, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, like a presentation, present their project. What else do we need to know about their project, their organization, why this project is important? Unless they have another way of doing it, we'll happily work with them, and we'll just use a little Zoom recording function and record these. We'll post those online, and then what we'll do is we will send the application packets to the review panel, as well as a link to the videos, and then the review panel will have about 2 weeks to, if we can pull this off, I'm a little nervous about the timing, but we're striving to give them a minimum of 2 weeks to review all of the project applications on their own, independently, on their own time. We realize we're asking people to, give some of their own time for this. And then we'll bring everybody together into a work session. I won't know until I see how many applications we get, how long that would be, but we're sort of assuming it'll be about a half a day. And it'll be a virtual meeting, and we will do a pairwise forced choice ranking, comparing apples and oranges to come up with a list of A, B, and C ranked projects. They will then forward that recommendation to the board. And the board members you will all get to have all the same background application materials. If you want to go look at all of the applications yourselves, you will have all of that available to you to do that. But you will receive the rankings from the advisory group. Concurrent with the advisory group process, We will also be putting a public notice out that PRTPO is looking at these projects and is going to forward a recommendation on them to WashDOT and will amend its Human Services Transportation Plan to amend these projects into the plan. So we will be asking for public comment on that amendment and the projects at the same time that we're sort of evaluating them with the advisory group, so that when it comes back to you in December, you will have all that background information, you will have the advisory group recommendations, and you will also have any public comments that we received on the projects and the amendment of the HSTP. So that's our game plan. I will say that PRTPO is in a very fortuitous position this year. For those of our members who are eligible for consolidated grants, PRTPO will have 7 A slots to award this year, which is pretty unusual. So we will have the highest rank projects, 7 of those slots will be open. 5 B slots. B slots award 25 points to projects, and we will have 7 C slots, so 12 points to projects. And we don't know for sure yet, but it's likely that all of the A projects that end up getting that A ranking from the board will just automatically be funded, and WashDOT will not even consider them any further in their own evaluation process. So that's where the timing of this before WashDOT gets too far into their process really matters. They kind of need to know which are our A projects. So it's a really good funding opportunity for these kinds of projects. It's a very immediate way for you to see that you just adopted a Human Services Transportation Plan that has certain strategies. And now here are projects that are going to come in to implement those strategies. So very direct plan and funding opportunity together. So that's my overview of this process. For those of you who haven't been through it, I may have left out really important things. For those of you who have been through it before, hopefully this is sort of reminding you of how this worked in the past. And with that, I would welcome any questions or comments or concerns or suggestions you might have about this. And at the end, I'm looking for your approval that this process is the right way to go for developing a ranking of consolidated grants applications.
Just for further information for those who are not used to this process, agencies are able to apply for either a 2-year or a 4-year grant. And if an agency applies for their grant for 4 years and they're awarded an A ranking, they get a slot this year and they automatically get that A slot in 2 years. That's correct, isn't it, Farah? That's why we only have 5 B slots available this time, is we're awarded 7, but we already have 2 filled by previous application processes.
And it's why 2 years ago we only had 2 A slots.
Right. So those are things you just want to keep in mind, that 2 and that 4 year. It's not like we have 7 necessarily available every time. So, and that the 4 years also keeps you out of this process, every other year. So with that, are there any questions or comments? I know, Wendy, you've been involved with this. I know all of our transit agencies have been involved with this thoroughly, and so have our tribes. Are there any questions or concerns that any of you have? Deidre.
I'm not a concern, but it sounded to me as though maybe there was some consternation about not including the TAC in this due to the time frame. Is there an opportunity to offer maybe an ex officio seat at that table if there is a member of the TAC that could offer technical expertise to that process without getting the entire TAC as part of that next step? Or is that outside of the realm of our process?
I don't think so. It would just add one additional member to the group And I'll just be real candid, as I always am, but not last time, but the time before we went through this process, there was again a condensed time frame, and there were only 3 members of the evaluation committee. And I thought that was extremely inappropriate, and I happened to be one of those members. So I believe if we can get, 5 to 7, that's a better number to work with. So I don't know, Sarah, if anyone else has any idea about having a TAC member as part of that committee.
That's easy to accommodate on our end, and that's a good suggestion too. And then the other thing I should clarify, we will happily brief the TAC in January, but it's a post, it's after a done deal, but certainly keep them in the loop. But that's a really nice way of continuity of bringing, maybe the chair or the vice chair could come across, or somebody with, somebody else from the TAC with that relevant experience. So thank you for a good suggestion.
Wendy?
Thanks, Beck. I just wanted to reiterate continuity and consistency. And I think Deidre's idea of bringing in a TAC member, and I really would like to recommend Ken to step up and be that. I know he has not been in a process before, but I think that he's been involved with the Human Services Transportation Plan, that he would be great at adding value. And if I can just restate that again, that we have a new Human Services Transportation Plan, one that was produced with the help of a consultant. And I think it's really important that we understand what's in it before we sit on a panel and provide recommendations. I think that transit is has certain complexities that it's best grounded in the Human Services Transportation Plan. And the things that I've been hearing from WashDOT is that without that plan, we have nothing to stand on. So thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to comment on the this grant review process at all? John?
Just more of a process question. Heaven forbid that we ever get to a tie. Having an even number on the board might create an issue. So
That's a good question, or a good point, John. And I can make sure that we have an odd number. I guess a question would be, we're going to have 2 members. Are there 2 members of the board who would be interested in participating on this? And again, somebody whose organization doesn't have a project, won't be submitting a project. So I know that sort of winnows down the opportunities here. So I'm curious, before we get off this, if there are any members of the board who would be willing to volunteer to be on this advisory group.
People are not raising their hand enthusiastically or rapidly here.
It's a lot of fun. I highly
But
recommend it.
Yeah, I would also invite us to reach out to Dick Taylor, who couldn't join us today, but he has been engaged in this process historically, so he has some experience. That doesn't.
Transit would be more than welcome to offer up a virtual donut for anyone who would.
Or a real donut, because you can come to the meetings now.
Good point. We'll buy donuts.
I think the
Sarah.
silence means we have a lot of applicants.
Sarah and Beck,
Well,
I'd be more than happy. I don't think the Port of Allen's going to be able to get its ducks in a row to get something going. So I'd be more than happy to learn the process.
Okay.
Thank you, Ted. And I will say, I will work with anybody. You won't feel like you're going in cold. I will provide as much support as you need going into it, so you're comfortable with what we're asking you to do. So So just so you know, we're not going to just leave you hanging out there if you're participating on this.
So do we have a motion to approve the consolidated grant review process as presented?
Dog moved by Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is there a second?
I would second it.
Thank you, John. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consolidated grant review process as presented. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against approval of the consolidated grant review process? Hearing none, it stands approved with unanimous consent.
Beck, if I could add one quick point at the
Sure.
end. A lot of our members are eligible to apply. I don't know if you are or are not applying, but if you are applying, this is a statewide grant program. Please ask for a letter of support from PRTPO. We won't say that your project is more important than somebody else's project in the region, but we want all of the projects from this region to succeed in the statewide competitive funding process and bring money home for the region. So please think about asking for letters of support and give us enough time to get those letters together for you.
Because didn't you say that the deadline was the 27th?
27th, yeah.
Yeah, that's coming up pretty quick. So with that, oh, George?
Yeah, I'll just ask quickly if there's going to be any request for washed out projects, particularly if it affects a state project. Those requests can come in pretty quickly too, because we do get a lot of requests. Thank you.
Okay, moving on down our agenda, we have the transportation outlook folio and process. Thera or Lindsay, do one of you want to take that?
Sarah, would you mind?
I don't mind at all. And Lindsay, I'll count on you and Beck to fill in any missing pieces. This is your annual the Transportation Outlook 2023 is an important communication piece that PRTPO produces every year to educate legislators who are your ex officio members of the board, educate them on what are sort of the pressing priorities at the moment that they might keep in mind as they go into this next session. We don't do lobbying, so I won't say it's actually an ask, but it's an educational piece. And this year's process, similar to past years, involved input from a legislative work group, which is made up of several of you all, as well as the TAC with, I think Ken was also part of that. And what we do with this is, we work on the legislative work group sort of works on some key planks of the message for the cover letter. And we brought that, those key planks to you in August. And then there's also a project list that's developed with everybody's input. That sort of cover letter, those key planks, the big message this year, the big request, I guess, would be that there is this region has for a while been focusing on more efficient use of federal funds, starting with these small pots of money that the rural counties have to administer, and they end up having to federalize fairly small projects, which is not a very efficient way of spending federal funds. And members of this region have been advocating for a while now with the state and with others to swap federal funds for state funds to make project delivery more efficient and cost effective. That seemed like a long shot. It seemed something that was a little bit too big for PRTPO to pursue on its own. But doing the work that PRTPO did do laid the groundwork for this year's ask, which is that the legislature approve a pilot program that has been proposed to them by the Joint Transportation Committee has proposed that a pilot program be established to swap federal funds for state funds for these rural STBG buckets of money that get administered. So what the PRTPO cover letter is saying is, yes, please support this pilot program. And oh, by the way, while you're supporting this, we have 3 rural counties that we would like you to include sort of in this pilot program. And that would be the Clallam, Jefferson, and Mason counties, all 3 of which administer fairly small pots of STBG, their federal funds, in a competitive process. We have talked with all 3 of the counties associated with this, the county leads, and they said, yes, we would love to be a part of this. So that is the main ask, if you would, on the front page of the first of the front page of the cover letter. But there are other things of importance to this region as well that this memo or brief calls out for legislators, just to keep this top of mind for them, what's important to the region. And that is obviously still support for broadband. This region has been really vocal in its support for broadband and just keeping that going. There's also something fairly new that I'm aware of for this region to put forward is to start a conversation about how can Hood Canal Bridge operations be optimized and be more efficient and have less disruption upstream and downstream from when the bridge closes. So that's on the list, not to say what needs to happen or who needs to be at the table. It's just saying, like, we need to get this conversation going, and that's here. Then the other big thing in here is about making sure that the funding programs for electric vehicles continue, and EV infrastructure, zero emissions infrastructure, continues to support investment in rural and tribal and small communities. There's a certain economy of scale that comes with some of these applications and this infrastructure that without some extra emphasis from the state in its grant programs, it's very difficult for smaller communities to participate. They have a hard time competing with the big metro areas. And so this is sort of, again, reiterating that the importance of that, and saying, because there's a lot of money, I'll just say there's a lot of money coming out for these types of investments. And so making sure that, again, our region, our partners have equitable access to that funding is really important. So those are sort of the highlights there. And then there's a project list that, again, developed with input from agencies, our members, projects that they have in their plans that they're promoting and putting forth, and wanting to call attention to them with our legislative representatives, as well as this is also handy for any other grant application processes that you might be going for, to be able to say, oh, and our project is on, PRTPO's, list. A good grant writer can do a lot with that. So that's sort of the document itself. This is the first time you're seeing it intact. So this ideally, hopefully we're close to sticking the landing and we don't need too many changes for your approval. From here, we will start scheduling the legislative forum. The executive committee are directed that we go ahead and, barring change of direction from the board, that we plan on organizing an annual legislative forum as we have in the past. It would, as it has the last 2 years, be conducted virtually. We also intend to just do one, as we did last year, and bring our legislators from across the region together into a regional forum so that they get that discussion back and forth between them. And we have representatives from both sides of the aisle on the House, Senate, and Transportation committees. And so that's a good thing for them to be talking together across those boundaries about what's important for the region. We will schedule that. It's likely to be the middle of November. It's likely to be that first week before, or that week before Thanksgiving is after the election, before Thanksgiving. So kind of a narrow window of opportunity there. And then we'll also, in that process, we will make sure that we're keeping any candidates in the loop, because we know that this is an election year and some of our representatives may be replaced, and we would want to educate any new representatives coming on. Then there's also interest, some board members have expressed interest also in possibly doing one-on-one outreach, but that's sort of separate, a little bit separate from what PRTPO would be organizing. So that's the sort of the rundown of this whole thing. I would entertain any questions.
Yeah, David's had his hand up for some time. Do you want to go ahead, David?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this goes into the communications piece, or whether it's just something we have to look at when we're advocating. Regards to the swap between the state and the feds, we will need to definitely get support from the other RTPOs and MPOs as part of that. And what I've heard from Puget Sound Regional Council is they're not totally on support for that. And one of the rationales was that assuring project delivery and accountability is that somehow in the messaging, if we do this swap, that it doesn't alleviate the swapped jurisdictions from the accountability and assurance that projects will be delivered. So somehow messaging in that follow on, not only just shifting the funds, but also that the accountability element is also still there and maintained. So I did hear some concerns from the PSRC about that, and whether they would support the swap and that pilot project or not.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and I do know they're focusing right now on the rural counties. So, and I think that they know PSRC is not interested. One thing we did, your point about accountability is spot on. And one of the things we talked about with our partners is that if you're participating in the pilot program, you know that you're going to be doing so with a spotlight on you. I mean, they're going to really you don't get to wash your hands of oh, we don't have to really worry about project delivery. I mean, I think that there will still be a lot of the same accountability measures, just without some of the federal compliance aspects that tend to add so much extra to the timing and the cost of it. I know WashDOT's they always try to say, don't put less than $500,000 of federal funding on projects because it's not efficient. And yet that's sometimes what these agencies have to do. So I appreciate your and I do know that there is some outreach to the other rural RTPOs. I don't know where they stand on this, but I do know that there is some outreach through them. But we were also really clear that this does not include Kitsap, because all of your funding is handled by PSRC, and they have just completely different stature. They've got federal authorization that WashDOT doesn't have any authority over.
The other thing, just point I would bring out with that is going back to RHSTP that we just completed, $80,000 with all of the federal requirements is not an efficient use of that money. I mean, if that had come through the state, we could have still met all the requirements and done it for less dollars.
Yeah.
And I believe our legislative ask is simply to support doing a pilot program. Lindsay.
Yeah, this conversation really hits at the heart of challenges for us as small jurisdictions, small governments, small organizations, in that the current grant system of how we get federal and state funds really doesn't work for us. And when there's so much money coming in, especially in transportation, a lot of it is just not going to be accessible for us. I know at the city of Port Angeles, we're short-staffed, especially in transportation. We're trying to hire a transit or transportation engineer, if anyone knows anyone. And so we just know we're going to miss a lot of funding opportunities. I was having a good conversation with our one of our public works folks saying, we really should just pass, half the infrastructure law funding down to governments, based on population, and then claw it back later if we misuse it. But having to apply ahead of time is a huge burden on organizations that don't have capacity. So I'm really glad we're emphasizing this. And I think David's comment really hits at the heart of it, is how do we balance access and accountability? And to me, there's other ways that we can do it other than make a really burdensome process up front that just prevents us from getting the capacity once we're already behind. I know there's a meeting with Derek Kilmer on Tuesday. Happy to share information about that with anyone about rural development. I plan to make similar comments about that, that process then. But I'm glad we're emphasizing it because I think now is the right time for us to move transit funding and transportation funding into rural areas. And getting this pilot going is really a great priority. One of the ideas with the legislative priorities for the PRTPO is that ideally our representatives have FARA on speed dial, maybe others in the PRTPO as well, of course, right? Because we all have relationships with different representatives. But for our representatives to see the PRTPO as a resource, as like the first go-to for reliable and accurate information about how to move transportation funding and improve the Olympic Peninsula and Kitsap Peninsula region. So I'm really glad we're moving forward with this. And I apologize, I don't have the motion in front of me, but I would certainly make it if it's time for that.
Okay, before we continue with that, does that motion include having just the one meeting and have it virtual this year with our legislators? It seemed to work well last year, and I know there was a discussion at the executive committee of having it in person, and it seemed like we were a little late to try and do that this year. So we were looking to do it virtually again. What I heard was that Lindsay made a motion to approve our transportation outlook folio and the process for the meeting. Is there a second to that?
Second to the motion.
Thank you, Wendy. There's a motion that has been seconded to approve the transportation outlook folio and the process for the meeting. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Hearing none, the motion passes with unanimous consent. Moving down the agenda, we had a, I want to say a expedited request from DOT regarding, is that where we are? Yes. Regarding some bicycle and pedestrian path funding that was available. Dara, would you like to take this this item?
Sure. This is a very expedited funding request from WashDOT in the Move Ahead Washington and Climate Commitment Act legislation that was passed last March. Was a new funding program called Connecting Communities. And it is meant to address the impacts that legacy highway projects have had on communities and people's ability to walk, bike, or roll in their communities because of these legacy highway projects that make it dangerous or uncomfortable. The way the budget proviso is written, it's a $50 million funding program, $10 million a year, and it's it spells out that WashDOT is to come up with a list, a $10 million list of projects each year, beginning this year, and they need to get that list of projects to the legislature by December 1st of this year. And I think that somebody realized like the last week of September that that was due shortly and it had not started yet. And so they're really scrambling this year to comply with this. Kudos to Beck. What they did, I think, is reached out to the chairs of, so what they're theoretically doing is reaching out to all the RTPOs and RTPO MPOs like PSRC to ask us to pull together projects that come out of our members' plans or tips. Something that's already gone through a public review process is what they were clear about. So it had to come out of an adopted plan or an adopted tip and submit those projects to them. That's what, so they contacted Beck to see about setting up a meeting to talk about this. Fortunately, or whatever, I mean, Beck is super on her emails, if any of you have ever noticed that. And so she said, hey, first of all, I'm out of town. And secondly, talk to our coordinator. And so it took a couple of days for them to get back to me. But yeah, they just basically said they're figuring this one out on the fly this year. I talked with them, I think it was on October 4th, and they said that they needed the project list by October 12th. So I did a blast out through all of our technical advisory committee members who kind of really have their hands on the projects and their tips and all, to say, do you have anything? Like, here's, and I sort of pulled a starter list. I went through our regional tip, I went through PRTPO's, our tip, as well as the legislative project list there to say, these, is there anything else? Is there anything else out there? Do these belong on the list? Help me fill in the gaps really fast. And thank you to those of you who were able to quickly jump on this and go with the flow, though there's very little guidance on this. The legislative proviso indicates bike and pedestrian and trail projects, and also projects that a strong emphasis on projects. There's a very strong emphasis on equity everywhere. And so this has a strong emphasis on equity. And so they were looking for projects that benefit underserved communities, vulnerable communities. And I think what they're going to do is be pulling up, pulling maybe the Department of Health's health disparities data is one of the things that they've been talking about. And then sort of plunk these projects on them maybe and see, I don't know how they're going to, but by November 1st, they will have their prioritized list and start working that through their internal process and through sort of whatever that mechanism is on their end, so that by December 1st, they have a list of projects to send to the legislature. So what you have in your staff memo is that list of projects that we submitted. There's no indication about how, all we know is that they're going to award $10 million. They're going to recommend $10 million worth of projects for funding. There's zero guidance on how, what size projects. So you'll see everything from very small projects to large projects on our list. There's zero indication about local match. So we're going in assuming that's possible. These projects could be 100% funded through a grant. We just don't know. We're just kind of going along with the flow. I will say that in my outreach to my counterparts in other regions, maybe their chairs were not as on it as Beck was, because word did not get out to all the regions like it did to us, and two large regions that I know of did not submit any projects. So I'm not quite sure what's going on the WashDOT end of things, but by golly, PRTPO has projects in there for consideration, and hopefully in the confusion, we will do extra well this go round. So what I wanted to do was to brief you on that, because you might be hearing about it. And then also, just because the way our process works, I'd really like your approval. I know it's sort of after the fact, but just to close the loop, your approval of this project list that was submitted, that was compiled from all of you. So I would answer any questions that I can. I don't know if I can. You probably have just as many questions as I do, and I won't have answers to them, but I can try and track them down for you. And then, like I said, asking for your approval of this.
Before we get into questions, and I'm assuming David may have some comments, I just wanted the executive board to know that Thera did come to the executive committee with this issue, and the executive committee gave permission or approval for Thera to move the list, to move the process forward and to submit the list prior to this, to board approval, because we could not get board approval, or it would have been very difficult before the October 12th deadline. So I just wanted you to know that she didn't just go off and do this on her own. The executive committee was well informed of it and gave her permission to move forward. So with that, we will open it up to any comments or questions. David.
Thanks, Beck. I think that last part's a good explanation when you talk about the executive board, because I have no problems with transmitting the list, but I do have some concerns about the board approving the list, because the process it still has a lot of questions on whether who wants to participate and what it was. But by just acknowledging the administrative transmission with approval from the exec board, I'm okay with that, but I have concerns about approving it as an official list from us, because just from our interactions with this, trying to understand what the program even is and what the qualifications are, or when the money is available, whether we wanted to participate or not, and this type of stuff. And also in my discussions with PSRC is having a different total read on this program. It just makes it uncomfortable. But I do agree that, approving the transmission of an administrative process with the exec board is good, and we want to stay on top of it as much as possible.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wants to have questions or comments?
The only question I have is kind of for David. What did you hear from PSRC? I reached out to KRCC and just asked, hey, are we going to see this request coming from you guys? And they said, well, we'll check into it. And I never heard anything back from them. So I was curious what what was going on the KRCC PSRC side, because we never saw a peep.
So when Thera brought the email to me, I immediately said, well, I'll contact PSRC because we submit this type of thing through PSRC, right, not the Peninsula. And PSRC was going, that's, yeah, we've talked with WashDOT, but they give us a totally different instructions. And they followed up, and they have just as much confusion about what this program is and what the requirements are and what the outreach is. And so right now they have no actions moving forward. And maybe that's one of the two MPOs, RPOs Thera was talking about, who didn't submit lists because, they weren't asked to submit lists.
Maybe you just have to be a little smaller to be a little more agile and not be caught up in bureaucracy.
Well, no, it's not a bureaucracy. A PSRC had prior discussions with them.
Oh, okay.
WashDOT gave them different instructions.
Oh, interesting.
And different emphasis. And so that, again, it leads me to, I have some uneasiness with this program and allocations that, there's $10 million out there that may or may not be distributed in a fair and equitable manner. And just what is even, as an example, the list that's sent in, we got a questionnaire back from WashDOT is, well, how many of these projects actually have a nexus with state routes?
That wasn't part of the question to begin with, was it?
Well, if you really look, it's and you read it the fifth time, you can see the nexus. But it's also one of, and it's not a and, it's an or. Or it kind of provides, there's three different major criteria they're looking at, but it doesn't say one supersedes any of the others, or one is a qualifier and one's not a qualifier. And so the one project for in county that the Port Gallen-Seclallam tribe submitted, got questions back, so what's your nexus to a highway? Well, it's not next to a highway. So does that mean it's disqualified, or, where does this now sit?
I will interject just here in that this particular request and also the freight requests that we had earlier this year, it was unclear to our group where Kitsap projects should be placed, whether it was through PSRC or the RTPO.
Right.
So we went ahead and put them on ours, included them in ours, just so if they're in two places, oh well.
Yeah, I went ahead and gave there a couple of projects just because nobody else was taking any. Like, okay, sure, put them in. What the heck? Even if nothing else, than to give a bigger list so that it's more obvious that there's need. Even if we're not going to score high enough for it to matter, having a larger list of need, can't hurt.
Wendy, you're unmuted. Did you have something you wanted to say?
No, I'm just sitting on the edge of my seat, ready to applaud the effort that Sarah and you did to get something moving in the right direction. And I felt really good about the process. And I felt good about fine tuning some of the language so it could be concise and succinct and be like a menu of projects for the state to see what's going on in the North Olympic Peninsula.
Thank you. And George, I see that you've unmuted yourself. Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I have a few details that I've learned that might be helpful and responsive to some of the questions that have come up. So the intent is to recommend to the legislature one capital and one planning project in each WashDOT region. So Olympic region would put forth, again, one capital and one planning project from among all the projects that are recommended. And then there'll be an overlay of tribal specific projects also. So we're probably talking, we got roughly 7 regions plus, a couple of tribal projects, so probably 16, 17 projects total will be recommended for the next biennium. And then whatever's not funded, pardon?
Biennium or year?
I believe it's going to be by.
So they'll do a $20 million list then instead of a $10 million list?
That part of it, I don't want to like put a specific on it. Who knows what the legislature will do? It's going to be our recommended list. So probably about 16 projects or so. And the focus is really on projects that are ready to roll. So we, I've seen a lot of projects come in where people are just kind of, hey, this is a great idea. We've talked about it a bit. And then there's others, such as your RTPO, which has a really strong list built from your RTP and then have a lot of consensus behind it. So that's kind of the focus, is getting the money out the door, putting it on projects that are going to be really ready to roll.
Oh, they didn't say anything about ready to go projects at all. And so how are you all? So then will Olympic region be responsible for picking the projects that come from the RTPOs within Olympic region, or how is that going to?
That's still headquarters, and at some point we'll probably be asked, hey, what do you think? This is what we're thinking, and do you agree? So.
Wow.
And this is happening lightning fast.
Yeah.
We're
fell through the cracks. It just fell through the cracks.
Yeah, as it is with you, we get a request for info, and let us know by this afternoon. In fairness, there's just a lot of grant. So I think we're all kind of scrambling. So and layered on top is, we're spending a lot of our energy on the complete streets, which is a major change for WashDOT. So that's taking a lot of our focus. So that's what I can share now.
Oh, that's insightful. Thank you. I feel like this is one of these things that's just changing week by week. So, so I don't anyhow, what Celeste told me was $10 million, that they'll do this every year, $10 million a year for the next 5 years. Maybe it'll be different. I don't know. We've got a list of projects in there that our locals would like to get funded that or come out of their plans, and hopefully this scramble will result in some funding for those projects, however it goes down on their end.
Mhm.
Okay, so I do believe that it would be important for this board to recognize the process and the list that was submitted. And I can understand David's concerned about it being a vetted list, because I don't think it was. It's just a list that was put together using plans and tips of our various organizations and an outreach to our organizations. So I believe that I personally would be comfortable with a motion to
Approve
do
the
I want to use the word approve or
approve the transmission of the list. Is that
right,
what we're focusing on is the submittal of the list, not endorsing the projects, but the actual.
right. The motion could be something to the effect of approving the transmittal of the list for the Move Ahead Washington Connecting Communities funding program. Does that meet your needs, David? Thank you. Is there someone who would care to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, David. Is there anyone who would care to second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. So it has been moved and seconded that the board approve the transmission of the project list for consideration to the Move Ahead Washington Connecting Communities Funding Program. Is there any discussion on that? Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there anyone who would be voting against the motion which has been moved and seconded? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion for the approval of the transmission of the list? Hearing none, the motion passes with unanimous consent. I thank you. We have had this morning a lot of action items and not just discussion items. We've really conducted a lot of business, and I thank you all for your participation and approval of moving forward with the work that Sarah and Ed and everyone has been doing. The next, we actually have a discussion item, and it is when we updated our UPWP for this next year, we still believe that we have approximately $10,000 that we can use towards another project. We've been waiting for the completion of the and the accounting for the HSTP to make sure that we were still within our budget and we could spend this $10,000. So I believe what's important for us now is just talk about what projects you would like us to further research so that we could come back with potential financial impact that they would have. What could we get done over the next year with this $10,000? Sarah, do you want, or does anyone have any comments to, or particular projects that are of importance to them that they would like to see us work on? Or Sarah, you just want to jump in with some ideas that we've already had?
Yeah, so in order that we do not have to amend the UPWP, I just pulled the 4, we had talked to you back, I guess, was it back, maybe it's a year and a half ago. I lose track on these 2-year UPWPs about potential things that we might focus on if there's the budget. And so they're spelled out there, you know, the concepts. None of them is a scope of work, but they are 4 different kinds of project areas that leverage or build off of things that have come up out of your discussion, were raised by you, by the members along the way. Resilience, increasing the resilience of the transportation system. We can go solve that with $10,000 just like that. But that would certainly be the start of a conversation. We could go any number of different directions with that. That was one of two sort of follow-up actions that the board identified coming out of the 2040 RTP and the comments that we received as an area that suitable for future follow-up. The other area of that was the electric vehicle readiness for electric vehicles. And you've sort of seen how that program has developed and moved along. And, you know, we have PRTPO is just in a convener role and a resource role in that. And what it would look like from the resilience side would depend a lot upon, you know, where we decide to go with it. So I don't have any I've got some ideas in there that could be pursued depending upon what's of interest to the board. This strategies to increase the rural inner city bus service. This, I believe, might have come up from a conversation, might have been a point that Marty had raised a while ago about the challenge of, you know, you can get from here to there without driving in the region. You can get around, but maybe it could be a little bit more convenient or faster or better connections. And so what this would do is bring together all of our transportation, our tribal and public transit partners to just sort of, again, explore this. Are there some obvious things out there that aren't being done, that could be done, coordination that is just, so this would sort of be an exploratory with those partners to see what it would take to improve inner city, long distance inner city bus travel in the region and make sure that all of our rural communities are connected, fully connected with the other communities. The third one on there is again another rural transit one. Actually, most of the three of these are sort of transit related. C is about innovations in rural transit service delivery. This came up as a suggestion. Instead of every transit agency going out and trying to do their own research as to what kind of best practices are emerging in the delivery of rural transit services, people, you know, they're busy just doing the day-to-day stuff. It's kind of hard to go stick your nose out there and see what's going on in the research arenas and the synthesis and best practices. That's what this would do, is go out and sort of assess what's going on elsewhere in the country that might be relevant here by tapping into some very well-known resources, research resources, and do a synthesis and compile that and bring that back and share that with our transit partners. And then the fourth one is spinning out of something that came up during the Human Services Transportation Plan update. And what this, what a one-click, one-call center is a one-stop shop for residents who don't necessarily know, do they need transit? Do they need tribal transit? Do they need a nonprofit to get them from where they are to where they need to be? They don't have to be dialed into all the different services out there. It would be a single point that people could contact to get traveler information, as well as maybe help coordinate that dispatching of services. Whether or not something like that is even viable for the Peninsula region, we don't know. And what this would do is start that conversation. And again, get our human services transportation partners around the table to start exploring what that would entail and to determine if it's even worth looking at closer. And if it is worth looking at closer, who should do that? And basically help position some entity. It's not PRTPO. I want to be really clear. This is not saying PRTPO would be the one-click, one-call center, but PRTPO in this task, what it would do is would convene those providers, start scoping this out, you know, sort of look at it pretty hard and see if this is worth, if it has merit, and if so, who would have to do what in order to make that happen. And that would ideally, you know, position, if it is viable, would position that an entity, whoever the logical entity is, to maybe pursue a consolidated grants application in 2 years to start that process. So that's a quick context of what they all are. You could theoretically do a little tiny bit in each, but that's not really going to do much. So if there's one or two of these that seem to be of particular interest to you, if we could identify what those are today and why they are of interest, then what we will do on the staff side is we'll go back and try to come up with a scope of work or one or two, alternate approaches for how you might tackle that and bring that back to you in December. This is for work to be completed by the end of June. So it's a small budget, it's a small time frame, and probably any of the things on here would point to whether additional work is needed in the future and by whom. So that's sort of the intent of this. They're very, I think, with the exception of the innovations in rural transit service delivery, I think the rest of these are really opening up other opportunities to, to see what would have great value for the region. So with that, I turn it over to you for your discussion, direction, how you would like us to proceed on this.
We can have some input as to what would be most beneficial to our members. Thank you, Lindsay.
Well, can I just say yes, all of the above? I mean, is that okay? So one of the themes that comes up for me in that list is issues around first mile, last mile access and public transit, which is huge in rural areas. So much of the time, like if you're taking your bike on the bus, it's like, is there even going to be space on that bus? And is that driver going to let me take my bike on if the bike rack on the front is full? Like, those are the things that people have to deal with on transit. I was on the bus on, I think, a weekend coming back from swim, and there was somebody going grocery shopping with a bike in the dark. It was a mess, you know what I mean? And so if we could figure out some of that regional coordination around these solutions for first mile, last mile. Like Bird Scooters is potentially going to be operating in the spring, and Port Angeles Swim, and I think probably Port Townsend too, if their new planner has been moving that forward. And that's great because we don't need to like say, oh, now I'm in Swim and I use Lime. Now I'm in Port Angeles, I use Bird. Now I use in Port Townsend, I use that other one for getting around when we get between places. There's we can obviously improve the routes between the cities, but often people don't use those because they can't get to where they're trying to go when they're in the cities. Even a place like Forks, some of the places are just a little too far to walk from the transit center for a lot of people. And so, I know for Clallam Transit, we're going to start doing micromobility, getting rid of our Pac-Man-esque shuttle in Squim and in Forks. And, we're now shopping around for which company to use for that app for scheduling. And, does it make sense for us to be using the same one that Kitsap Transit uses on Bainbridge Island? I don't think we're coordinating between regions, and I'm not quite sure how much somebody who's using the Squim micromobility would also be using the Bainbridge Island one. But not having to switch systems as we travel between the populated areas on the Olympic Peninsula and the Kitsap Peninsula would be something that I'd be interested in figuring out. Where is it appropriate for us to coordinate and say, hey, we think this is the best practice that would be better for people if it was deployed across our region versus, like innovate and do what you think is best in these other areas.
Thank you. Leslie.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more with Lindsay, but I also need to just add a little piece to that. And I totally agree. We just need to know better about our last mile options, because otherwise we won't even attempt what I'm going to suggest next, which is to to really start figuring out how we get long distances between cities. So on B strategies, the long distance intercity bus travel in the peninsula regions. I don't know if it's possible to connect those two to split the 10 grand and study both, but they're but those long haul travels plus the need for the last mile, if we could start advertising some of those possibilities in our region, just as a messaging thing, I don't know, I feel like it would be really inspirational.
That's good.
Wendy, and then Amy.
Thanks, Beck. I really liked what I heard. I heard half of what Lindsay was saying. That I'm on behalf of the Jamestown Slalom Tribe. I'm worried about macro mobility, and yet I agree that the Pac-Man version of the swim shuttle is not working. Recently, like as a few days ago, I took over for another employee who was exhausted of trying to distribute free bus passes to employees. But it's so very apparent that we can't get employees to medical centers because there's no last mile. And there's no first mile either if you consider that people feel unsafe parking in vacated parking lots that have no lighting. And at the same time, I think a one call center would be one of the greatest gains that the PRTPO could do to sort that out and bring a fresh voice that draws in the nonprofits that have a lesser voice in this process. So I'm kind of, gravitating towards the transit opportunities.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah, I'll just make another plug for helping with that communication to let folks know what opportunities are available in the region. We've been working with, to get the word out that we do have a first mile, last mile option for people using our fixed route transit systems, using an EcoLane app. And really this last month, we have surpassed our pre-COVID ridership on that service. And so but we still find people that say, I just can't get where I need to go, but it is available here. So just another plug for that communication and connecting people with the resources that are available, I think would be really helpful.
Anyone else? Sarah, did you get enough information from the folks to do a little scoping and price estimating?
I do, and I think it's, if I heard the group right, the folks who spoke, and please let me know if I'm misrepresenting it and or if you disagree with this, that really this first mile, last mile, sort of what's identified in C under innovations in rural transit service delivery, really focus on that and how, what's out there right now in the region today, what's being used elsewhere, how can it be applied more efficiently, and where does coordination make sense? So sort of scoping that, but then linking that, it ties in with this, the long distance intercity transit service that, so yes, those are the two that I took away, and they are related. They as you all indicated, they really are related. What good does beefing up our rural intercity long distance bus service if people can't get to and from it? And then and so yeah, they really do go hand in hand. So that's where I think what I'm hearing right now coming up from members, and not. And yes, I think a one-click, one-call center would be really neat, but maybe this isn't the right time to start talking about that. But we'll continue to keep our ears open for opportunities that in the future, when it is time to talk about that can all feed in there. So if I come back in December with an approach on this, will anybody here be surprised to see that, and I'm disappointed to see that? Comfortable with working on that between now and the end of the biennium? Okay, super. I did get what I need then.
Okay, thank you. As I'm doing two things at once. And then, do you want to give a highlight of your coordinator's report?
Sure. Hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory. As always, I just try to hit some highlights that don't show up on your agenda that should be relevant to your organizations. Again, there's lots going on right now in the funding world. There are two project teams that submitted for an electrification of transportation systems planning grant. And through Department of Commerce, both of those teams have been invited to submit the more detailed phase 2 application. And one of those teams is up on the north end. It's Jamestown Sklallam Tribe working with City of Sequim, and I think maybe Port Angeles is that one is shaping up, and the PUD up there. And then down in Mason County, Squaxin Island Tribe, lead applicant for an effort with the Skokomish Tribe, Mason County, Port of Allen, and Mason Transit. And there is room for City of Shelton and Port of Shelton if they would like to come on to that one. And so both of those efforts are filling out their more detailed applications now. And then I'll just say, as somebody as your PRTPO coordinator who can't help but stick her nose into what's going on stuff like this around the edges, I have some questions for Department of Commerce about the contract awards and grant management that when I get those questions answered, I'll be forwarding them on to the applicant. So that's exciting. There are lots and lots. There's just, as Michael said, if it was possible, it's great to have so much money available for transportation and things like electrification, but it's a lot. It's like a fire hose right now. So I'm sympathetic to you and your staff who are trying to confront and deal with all of this. Note that there are also a lot of road project funding opportunities coming up as well. Clean fuel standards is another one that your staff, if you haven't encountered it already, you're going to soon. It's a new program that goes into effect in January. It may be beneficial. I will talk with the executive committee about this, but it may be beneficial to arrange a very high-level briefing for the board, just to be aware of what this it's a whole new way. It's tied in with the cap and invest program. It involves emissions credits and trading on the environmental commodities exchange, and this can actually generate revenue for your projects. It is remarkably complicated. And it starts January 1, and the rules are still being written. So I don't envy your staff who are going to be trying to brief your boards, brief your councils and boards on this, about how to participate and register and get involved. And it might be beneficial if you all had a little bit of a high level understanding of it, so you can, it'll be helpful later on. And so I'll talk with them about that. And then just other things in there. I will note ADA transition plans for all of our municipalities. There's been a requirement to have ADA transition plans in place since about 1994, but there's been very little follow-up on that. And but that's about to change. So Federal Highways is, in order to access federal funding, Federal Highways is pushing WashDOT to start checking to make sure folks have compliant ADA transition plans. So don't be surprised when that starts bubbling up. And if you don't have one, this is a really good time to start thinking about putting one into place. As always, these things are meant for you to be able to easily pull it out of the packet and share. Feel free to distribute this information to your colleagues or staff who it may actually be most applicable to. And I am a resource to help follow up on any information. My contact information is there, and point them in the direction of more information or resources. So I think that would cover it, unless there are any specific questions.
Thank you. So there's always a whole bunch of stuff going on behind the scenes, and it is our intent to have added value to our members through the RTPO. We do have now, I'm going to open the meeting to public comment. If there's anyone in our audience that would like to share testimony at this point. Ed, do we have anyone in person?
No, nobody.
On the webinar? Nothing.
No.
Okay, in that case, I will also close the public comment section. And open up our meeting to just general member sharing. If anyone has anything they would like to share about their jurisdiction. Lindsay.
Well, I want to thank whoever found the name tag feature in the webinar. It is pretty awesome. Just to be able to remember where everybody's from in their jurisdictional or organizational affiliation. And then, on that ADA transition plan, I think Port Angeles, we recently completed it. Hopefully, I'm not thinking of a different plan that we now have to do. And we have something like $30 million to $40 million of backlog sidewalk maintenance. And that's just our existing sidewalks, not even all the sidewalk gaps, which is a huge issue as well. So just existing infrastructure. We made a plan to put probably about $300,000 a year into that, which means that we would catch up with that backlog maintenance in 100 years if it's 30 million divided by 300,000 a year. So, I mean, I really feel like it's basically an ADA liability compliance plan, not actually an asset management plan. And I'm just sharing that to remember the scale of the challenge that we all face with backlog maintenance, especially in transportation, because it's funded from our general fund, which is in tax short, and it's in a structural deficit, at least in Port Angeles, I think for many other cities. And so, keeping our eye on the prize, that there's a lot of work for us to do to transition, like our WashDOT rep has said, to complete streets that are accessible to everybody. So I'm glad to be working on that with everybody, and thank you back for always a well-organized meeting and being on top of your email as we discussed earlier.
Thank you. Wendy.
I have two announcements. First, the Olympic Discovery Trail across the Dungeness River, the Railroad Park Bridge, is now reopened, and it's a great improvement to what used to be there. We're very proud of the River Center as well, so we hope that you can bring your families and enjoy some fall weather on the bridge. And also my second announcement is the carbon neutral plan has just been prepared by Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe for Jamestown S'Klallam Tribe's facilities and body of employees from government to enterprises. And it is a very easy to read document where it is comparing metrics from the way things used to be to the way they are today, to give us some idea of the goals and how we're going to get there. So I think that this is stemming from the North Olympic Development Council, and we're really glad to be part of that group and being able to take their grant funds and make something good with it.
Thank you. Leslie.
Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of raise some awareness about a really big potential coordination to get the Great American Rail Trail to come, through Bainbridge, through Kitsap County, through the other counties, all the way to the Pacific Coast. And so right now, there are 3 nonprofits that are taking the lead and also putting the money in to fund a consultant to apply for a RAISE grant. And so this RAISE grant, if we were to get it, would be a huge amount of money that we would not be able, it probably wouldn't still be able to fund the completion of the trail through all the counties and tribal lands, but it would get us a huge amount further along the way. And the Olympic Discovery Trail is a lot further along than the Kitsap STO, the Sound to Olympics Trail. But nonetheless, I just wanted everyone to know that this is an inter-county coordination, and right now there's no money being asked for it because these nonprofits are putting up the money for it. But I'm super excited and just wanted to raise awareness and potentially support for this in the future.
Thank you. And I'm going to just give an update on something the city of Port Orchard did. And John, if you would please correct me if I misrepresent anything. But the city of Port Orchard just did take advantage of that 0.1% sales tax for its TBD. And they have some very specific enhancements they're going to make to their transportation system. And so that is something I know that we had, the RPTO had asked for sustainable funding, and we see this as that, or the city of Port Orchard sees this as that opportunity. So anyway, we did that. We don't have the 0.2% voted on by some of the other TBDs, but they did take the council-matic for the 0.1%. Did I capture that correct, John?
Yes, exactly correct.
Yeah. So anyway, I personally was pleased. I was pleased to see someone take advantage of that. And maybe that will help us, as Lindsay said, get rid of some of this backlog that we have. It is a good source of revenue. Is there anything else that anyone would like to share what's happening with their jurisdictions? Okay, with that, and because it'll be the middle of December before we get back together, I wish everyone a happy Halloween and a happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you all before Christmas. So thank you, and we stand adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.